Hello, my name is Elena Tkachenko, and in this paper I will present the results from an ongoing project on translanguaging strategies in mainstream early childhood education in Norway. This research is done in collaboration with my colleagues Sara Hexeberg Romøren and Nina Garmann. So I'm presenting on behalf of this group. And the data that we present today has recently been published in Journal of Home Language Research if you are interested in following up on this presentation. The number of minority language speaking children in early childhood education is increasing in many European countries. In Norway, the recent statistics show that the proportion of children who speak a different language at home than Norwegian, Danish, Swedish, Sami, and English was around 20% in 2021, and in some regions this proportion is even higher, like for example in the capital area in Oslo, where the proportion of minority children is about 30%. Norwegian is the main language of instruction in early childhood education in Norway. However, the official statistics show that many children and also staff have competences in other languages than Norwegian. However, we know very little about how this language diversity is used in the daily practices in early childhood education institutions. The national curriculum for kindergartens in Norway, which is from 2017, involves many directives related to language, but the one that is very central for this project is presented here. It states that ECEC institutions should ensure that linguistic diversity becomes an enrichment for the entire group of children and encourage multilingual children to use their mother tongue while also actively promoting and developing their skills in Norwegian or Sami. For the whole project, our aim was to investigate the linguistic diversity as it is represented in mainstream Norwegian ECEC institutions in Oslo region and explore how languages other than Norwegian are used in early childhood education settings. In this paper that we present today, we will focus especially on how home language support takes place within the context of Norwegian ECEC and what strategies are used by the staff to promote home language use. From previous research, we know that maintenance of the home language is a constant concern for multilingual families raising their children in communities where home languages have minority status. For example, some research shows that many and multilingual children experience reduced use of home languages especially after they start formal education due to the dominance of the society language in educational settings, monolingual educational practices, and lack of support and reduced value of the home languages in mainstream education. At the same time, researchers also encourage teachers to acknowledge and appreciate the children's proficiency in their home languages so that the children can benefit from the use of their whole linguistic repertoires. Strategies for supporting home languages have been studied in some contexts, for example, in the family, in community schools, in bilingual educational programs, and in the work of bilingual support teachers. However, little research in mainstream classrooms has been made where there might be little overlap between the language repertoires of the teachers and the children, and this is what our study is about. We have analyzed 26 narratives from practice written down by our students in early childhood teacher education. The students reported from the ECEC centers where they worked or had practice placement. Narratives from practice is a genre that the students are very familiar with, both in connection with their studies and with their work. The narratives do not necessarily describe the events exactly as they happened, events as lived, but they reconstruct events with a focus on how the author sees and interprets the event as told. Our analysis takes the form of a conventional qualitative content analysis. Based on this analysis, we have identified 3 most common translanguaging strategies for home language support. The first one, initiating activities that encourage home language use. The second one, facilitating metalinguistic conversations. And the third one, consulting or involving language experts. Initiating activities that encourage home language use involved often situations when they used music or digital tools, reading books, or counting. It seems that many ECEC centers had some routines in using these activities as stepping stones for including children's home languages. For example, counting from 1 to 10 in different languages represented in the group, or singing particular songs in different languages were quite common activities in our data. Some narratives, however, provide examples of activities that build links to the children's homes and prompted the children's use of their home languages in this way. When they talked about their home and their families, they wanted to use their language. The second strategy that we identified is facilitating metalinguistic conversations. Such conversations involved reflections about how one says something in different language or comparing languages. For example, here in the example that I have, Knut, the teacher, says that he can say good morning in English, and Gabi, the child, says, I know Somali, do you know Somali? And they continue talking about these languages. Metalinguistic conversations were most often initiated by the staff. However, sometimes they occurred spontaneously and were initiated by the children. But the staff had to play an active role in developing these children's initiatives to show their language knowledge. And the third strategy that we identified as involving language experts. Both members of staff, parents, and children themselves could take the role of language expert. Several narratives show that children were not always eager to take on the role of language expert, and it could take some time before they felt comfortable to share their linguistic expertise. Bringing language experts to situations to make communication easier could be either planned in advance or occur spontaneously when, for example, there was need to facilitate communication. For example, one narrative described arrangements that staff in one kindergarten asked the parents to write a list of some basic words in the children's home languages which they used. In another kindergarten, the teacher involved an assistant from a different group who spoke the child's home language and took this assistant with them on hiking every week to support 2 children who spoke Urdu. When language experts were brought spontaneously, it was quite often because of communication breakdown or conflicts that needed to be solved. Due to time limits for this presentation, we don't have an opportunity to go deeper into an example of a narrative from practice, but generally when we analyze the narratives, all of them show that using translanguaging strategies resulted in some positive linguistic experiences for the children and staff. Children were engaged in the conversations and contributed actively in the described situations. By showing acknowledgement of the children's home languages and diverse linguistic repertoires, the staff positioned the children as competent multilingual users. In the collected narratives, the staff also showed acceptance and positive attitudes towards the children's home languages, which might be an important factor in strengthening the children's multilingual identities. The narratives from practice in this project demonstrate also the complexity of language practices in ECEC institutions. When different languages are interplay, thus making linguistic diversity visible for the whole group of children. Taking active role in these situations, the kindergarten staff can also be seen as role models for how one can navigate these flexible and dynamic multilingual language practices. Summing up, our research shows that children and staff in mainstream Norwegian early childhood education institutions use multiple languages. Children's home languages are used in both planned and spontaneous situations. In our data, we identified 3 main translanguaging strategies for home language support: initiating activities that encourage home language use, facilitating metalinguistic conversations, and involving language experts. Our data demonstrate that translanguaging strategies result in positive experiences for the children. However, we cannot be sure to what extent the data in our study represent typical or common practices. Since this project used students in early childhood teacher education program, and writing narratives from practice about use of other languages than Norwegian was an assignment in their course on multilingualism, we think that narratives from practice in our study might represent student teachers' first attempts at using translanguaging as a pedagogical tool. Some areas for future research can be to explore how representative such practices are and how such practices can be more common, and what competence the teachers need to successfully navigate this complex and dynamic language use. Here you can see our reference list, and if you got interested in our project, we hope you can read more about this study in our newly published article or contact us by email. Thank you very much for your attention.